Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. If you're new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe now for future content. And please make sure to leave a like on this video, as it will help it perform at a much higher level in the search engine. If you want to be featured on an upcoming video, email your true scary stories to my email in the description box below. I hope everyone had a good week. It's time to sit back, relax, and be sinful. I'm going to tell you a story that happened when I was 17. This story still freaks me out so much, and I don't even know what happened that day. I would like to have your opinion on this, so please comment below. It was in November, and my friend Jacob was going to have his birthday for these 17 years, and me being a good friend, I proposed for him to sleep at my house and then go for a walk the next day with friends in the forest. He accepts, everything goes well, he sleeps at my place, and the next day we leave with friends for the 2-hour trip to the forest. Once we got on the road, I realized I had forgotten the keys to my house at home, and then that meant that the door to my house was not locked. I told myself that we were in a small town and that few people frequent the suburbs. The day is going well and it's time to go home. I was stressed about knowing if my house had been robbed. Then in the end, I said to myself that there was little chance. My friend Jacob wanted to spend more time before he went home to do his homework, so I decided to let him spend one more night at my house. We walk in and I see that my house is intact, but it was nice and wide open. So I walked around the house and noticed something. The cellar door, which I never open, was open, and there was a white piece of paper on the floor. I quickly realized that we had to call the police and check if there was anyone there. So to reassure us, me and Jacob decided to shout that if the stranger didn't come out, the police would come and take care of it. I was paralyzed with fear, and I feared the stranger was coming. Bad news. The stranger who was in the cellar cried, "It's not your home, it's mine. Now get out." Jacob was scared and asked me to come and see if the police were there. Luckily, law enforcement was there and they took the man away in the police car. The police found kitchen knives, an axe, iron chains, and a board. There was also a white sheet of paper on which was written, "Behind you." I didn't understand from the beginning, and the police told me later that the individual ran away from an asylum. Today I am 25 years old, and now I always check to see if I have my keys to my house on me. I was aboard an aircraft carrier on an extended deployment in the Western Pacific. I was asked by my senior officer in my squadron if I would like to accompany him up to the 011 deck of the ship's island to view flight operations, which is launching and recovering of planes for a few hours. Of course, I told him. Picture an absolutely clear, sunny sky that was deep blue with no clouds, maybe a slight breeze or not. We settle into a couple of leather chairs and are ready to watch. The carrier is approximately 1,000 feet long with 2 catapult tracks that are used to launch 2 planes consecutively. Amidships there are 2 more catapult tracks. They are called the bow cats and the waist cats. The planes started to line up in their order and await the G-forces that will snap their necks when propelling them at 150 miles per hour in less than 2 seconds. As I watched, there was always a very small dip when leaving the flight deck before gaining altitude. I had previously watched planes being launched while standing in the catwalks toward the near of the ship. At present, I'm looking down upon the launch cycle with a whole new appreciation for all the sailors involved. I'm sitting with the commander for my squadron along with close to a dozen other men who make up the team working for the air boss. He controls all of the flight deck action from the perch, a rather large man who was an all-American football player at the University of Georgia. He has a total respect and some fear as well from everyone in this observation space and out on the flight deck. He controls everything by barking out orders over the 1MC, which is basically a loudspeaker for all hands to hear. No one talks to him unless asked. I'm watching the A7s, A6s, EA6Bs, and E2Cs complete their launch. Now we come to the true Navy's badass, the F-14 Tomcat. We're talking about heavy-duty muscle here. When they are locked into their cat track, ready to launch, both afterburners are lit up to help gain altitude when leaving the carrier deck. The Bowcats and Wastecats have now launched 4 F-14s and are ready to repeat the cycle. The next jet launches and goes straight off the deck and down to the sea. Instantaneously, every man's eyeballs up in the perch bugged out as if to fly out of their sockets. Total panic and horror shown all over their faces. What happens next was my first thought. I sat glued to my seat and waited for anything to change this nightmare unfolding before us. A miracle is what I called it. It only took seconds. The 2 aviators managed to hit the eject button before hitting the calm blue sea. At the same time, the air boss was barking out orders to all hands. Man overboard! Man overboard! This is not a drill. Man overboard! All hands man your stations. I was scared shitless watching what had just happened. I slid down 11 sets of stairs in under a minute. In my dreams, I will occasionally see those 2 dark reddish-orange fireballs from the jet's afterburners as they launch and end up going over the bow into the ocean. I will never forget the look on all of the men up in the island viewing flight operations. Many of you will not understand people's reactions under these kinds of circumstances. I've witnessed what could have been a total disaster. Something tragic turned into another eye-opening event as within seconds, the aviators were up in the air waiting to come down to the water's surface, and in just a few short minutes they had been rescued by the man overboard sailors. With the flight deck of an aircraft carrier being considered by many to be one of the most dangerous places to work anywhere, I would have to simply agree. More than once through the years, I have politely retold this story to young men dreaming of going to sea. I tend to tear up just a little while sharing the fact that in a split second, I watched 2 naval aviators come close to a horrific death. Sorry guys, this is my dad's story. It's kind of personal. This happened 10 years ago. I was 16 back then, and I was coming home from a party. It was around 11 p.m. A van pulled up beside me. Before I could react, somebody jumped out of the van, put his hand over my mouth, and dragged me into the van. He quickly closed the door, tied me up, and put a piece of cloth between my lips to shut me up, drove off. Luckily, he was speeding, and a police officer made him stop. The police officer saw me, immediately arrested the man, and luckily I lived to tell the story about it. Oh, how that day could have gone so much differently. This story takes place in 2014. I was 17 years old and I lived in a small town in Massachusetts, and every night I would take walks after sundown. I enjoyed it. It was peaceful. Now I understand that this whole setup is inherently sketchy, and walking around town in the dead of night is just asking for trouble. I was a very antisocial person, so I did it every night. I lived on a street about 4 miles long in total, and there would be a few houses every half mile or so, but for the most part things were pretty secluded, other than a decently sized cemetery that I would sometimes hang out at. Side note, a woman had committed suicide at that cemetery after being involved in some white-collar scandal. I never knew her or her family, and I mean no disrespect to them. There was also another cemetery in town which was pretty famous for alleged supernatural events that people used to do witchcraft in. Very popular among ghost hunters and people in cheap scares. So, our little town was kind of a hot spot for creepy occurrences. The street had about 5 streetlights, and one of them was constantly bugging out and never got fixed. In order to get to the center of town, I'd have to walk a few miles, essentially in the pitch black darkness, with nothing but a mag light, my headphones, and my cell phone. Past the cemetery, at the end of the street there was a local donut shop, and then the center. I would listen to music in the dark with the flashlight being the only decent light for miles till I got back to town. I would wear this long black pea coat. At one point I shaved my head completely bald so that people would think I was creepy and wouldn't bother me if they were driving down the road at a particular hour. The local police were familiar with me, my family, and our kind of messed up background. In 2013, my brothers saved me from my dad after he tried to beat me up. He was beaten unconscious, and the police were called. After that, he left, and I haven't seen him since. That's not related to the story in any way. I think the cops realized I was a troubled kid, but not out to do anything malicious. I do have a clean record, no fighting, stealing, or anything like that, and they kind of let me do my own thing. I would often go into these weird fantasies where I was some vampire hunter who had to protect the town from monsters that came out at night. I pretended I was some parody comic book hero called the Night Lurker who used a weaponized flashlight to fight evil. It was cringy and stupid, but it was mostly a joke, and I had an extremely overactive imagination. I try not to tell most people about that. What does all of this have to do with the clown man? Absolutely nothing. Anyways, it was Halloween night. I was on one of my evening patrols and had gotten to the center of town. At the town center, there's a 24-hour gas station called Cumberland Farms. If you live in New England, it's most likely where you'll fill your tank or buy overpriced snacks. As I was walking up to the store, there was an extremely tall, slightly pot-bellied man who was dressed like a clown, but his makeup made him look a bit more like Beetlejuice. He was staring at me with his eyes wide open with a toothy grin. I pretty much figured it was Halloween, and I thought it was just some guy trying to mess with me for fun. So I said, "Happy Halloween, man," and then kind of blew right past him into the store. I bought myself a soda and some candy, and when I walked out the door, he wasn't there anymore. I continued my walk, put my headphones on, and forgot about the guy. The whole town center is connected on Route 9 through Main Street, and when I wanted to get around town, that was a road I'd walk on. So, as I continue on, I let go of every single bit of common sense I had at the time, blasted my music to the point where I couldn't hear anything else, and just started running on autopilot, because I'd done this so many times. After walking about a mile away from the gas station, there were no cars on the road, and I started to feel a bit uneasy. I looked back, and what do you know? This giant clown Beetlejuice-looking guy is about 5 feet behind me, with the same expression on his face from before. Eyes wide, toothy grin. I also need to paint a picture of how tall this guy is. He must have been 6'7" and essentially was towering over me. I'm 5'8". I kind of stop in my tracks, take my headphones off, and look at him. He just passes right by and says, "Happy Halloween," in some weird-ass goofy clown voice, and then continues walking down the street in front of me. That's the last interaction I have with him, but I keep my eyes on him as he continues walking. Last I saw him, he went into a subway parking lot and was peeking into the windows of people's cars. I get that the guy was clearly just trying to creep people out because it was Halloween night, and it's fun, but the dude waited for me to leave the store out of sight and then proceeded to follow me down the street when I wasn't paying attention, just to say Happy Halloween and then dip, and I still had the entire length of the street my house was on to walk in the pitch black. Needless to say, I turned my music volume down, was constantly looking behind me the whole way home. Very creepy. My dad was a young teenager at the time, who was riding on the bus in Chicago. A man got on and sat in the seat across the aisle from him. He turned toward him and started up a conversation. My dad says that the hairs on the back of his neck raised, and he got a seriously creepy vibe from him. Gacy was all smiles and charms, and was asking my dad increasingly personal questions. Luckily, before things got too personal or creepy, my dad's stop came and he enthusiastically noped off the bus and forgot about it. It wasn't until years later, 1978, the year I was born, that he saw on the news that the same creepy guy, affectionately known by children as Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown, had a thing for teenage boys. Here's another creepy detail. My dad is best friends with a guy who happened to live across the street from Gacy as a child. He confirms that Gacy was a creepy dude. He also confirmed that his parents observed the police forensics go to work on Gacy's basement and painstakingly remove 26 teenage boys from the crawl space. Sweet home Chicago. I was pulled over about an hour ago, but right off the bat my gut told me something was wrong. I was not breaking any laws while driving, and I was obeying the speed limit. This guy pulls me over. First and foremost, his car is unmarked. I think he might be a detective or an unmarked officer. Second and biggest red flag, no badge anywhere in sight on his belt or shirt. Third and final, no partner in the car behind me, and getting a little bit flustered when I asked if he could show me his identification before I gave my ID to him. He asked me to get out of the car. Right. And when he's finally looking away, I floor the gas and he does not follow me. I'm not sure if I did the right thing. Minor detail. There were 2 German SS runes on his right hand, which to me were the final straw. Could this be a fake cop? Comment below. Thank you guys for watching and listening to the very end. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel. And I want to thank you guys that are already subscribed for the love and support that you show me all the time. It's greatly appreciated, even more than you guys realize. Email your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. The link is in the description box below as well. Till we meet again, stay sinful.